All right, guys, a post Joel Kahn debate. I'm doing my Michael Grieger imitation as I've been walking, minus the sarcopenia and the whiny voice and the bizarre mannerisms. But so I just got done doing I think about a 45-minute walk wearing a 50-pound weight vest through the trails in the neighborhood and kind of chatting with people as it's going. But so a couple things. One is, fundraiser, 78,000. So we continue to get there. We're almost, we're getting close to halfway to that $200,000 goal. So again, thank you for everybody that has donated to make this very important clinical trial happen. We are reaching out and, experts. There's a guy who calls him he's a vegan that calls himself the Gut MD. I asked him, hey, what do you think the best test for measuring gut function is? Because if he says, look, do this or that test in this intervention trial, and I haven't heard back from him. Maybe he won't respond, but I'm trying to find this out. Maybe if he doesn't answer, I'll get some other gastroenterologists for their opinions and talk about the best outcome measures for perhaps gut function as being one of the things we measure on this study. Again, determined to do excellent, high-level, rigorous science, randomized controlled trial. Chips fall where they may. I am not the primary researcher. We are going to have professional researchers carry out this study. And one of the reasons why it costs a lot of money. Had a great talk with Dr. Tony Hampton. Tony Hampton is a low-carb MD practitioner in the Chicago area. He's African-American, serves primarily an African-American audience, talking about some of the unique challenges maybe working in that environment, and I think it's such an important thing that he's doing. I think that community in particular, which tends to have a greater burden of cardiometabolic disease, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, so on and so forth, probably needs this message as much or more than anybody else. And it's nice that someone in that community that's actually part of that community can help relay that message. So we had a great chat about that and much more on the MeatRx podcast this morning. Again, the MeatRx podcast is available, directly for our members. If you haven't joined MeatRx.com yet, shame on you. It's free for the first month and extremely cheap after that. And then eventually it'll be available on YouTube for you guys who are interested in doing that. Let me talk about gout, because a lot of people have a lot of questions about, can I do a carnivore diet with gout? So traditionally, when we think about gout, we think of people with high uric acid levels, and when uric acid levels are high, more often than not, there is a higher chance that you will see the clinical manifestations of gout. That being often severe joint pain, classically being described at the big toe, but it can affect any joint, quite honestly, knee, elbow, the back, a lot of places. And then there's also these skin manifestations. So people will develop these really big pockets of material. It actually looks like toothpaste. When I operated on those in the past, you cut the skin open and it looked like you just got a bunch of toothpaste out. But gout, again, classically associated with higher levels of uric acid, but just like cholesterol appears to be, I think we're finding that uric acid also seems to be a dependent variable. That is to say, there are people with very high levels of uric acid that don't get gout. Curious. There are people with low levels of uric acid that do get clinical signs of gout. And so while the trend is, higher uric acid levels more likely to get gout, there are these, sort of observations on the ends that seem to may not make sense unless you put it in the framework of this is a dependent variable, like many things. Now we are, when they first discovered gout and they saw high uric acid levels, the knee-jerk reaction, let's get everybody's uric acid level down. And that does work for, many people. But it's really a kind of a brute force, not a very sophisticated, very nuanced way to think about it. And what more and more seems to happen is we see that there is this metabolic environment, this metabolic milieu, inflammation, insulin resistance, an immunologic state, pH balance, temperature, all of these things, seem to be in the mix as to what ultimately happens for people to get gout. And so, for those people that maybe they have this high level of uric acid, but they don't have those other things going on, and guess what? They never get gout. In fact, there's some pretty strong evidence in the literature that shows that higher uric acid levels, which you definitely can see on a carnivore diet, due to the purine metabolism that occurs when you eat foods that are higher in purines, which meat is one of those. There's evidence to suggest that uric acid, which most people don't know, is actually an antioxidant. And so in its antioxidant role, it has a beneficial effect. And it may be offsetting some of the role of otherwise, which would be taken up by vitamin C. So let's say you go on a meat-based carnivorous diet, vitamin C is not as plentiful, but uric acid is more so. Now, assuming you don't have all those other cardiometabolic factors, you may get the antioxidant benefits, endogenous antioxidants, I want to point that out. Endogenous antioxidants, the ones our bodies produce, are much more efficacious than exogenous antioxidants. You know, the magic berries, the goji berries, the crap that they want to sell you, because we know that those really don't even get absorbed very well. They're often altered or detoxified by the body. So endogenous antioxidants, things we make, glutathione, cystathione, superoxide dismutase, and many, many others, including uric acid. So we see that as that goes up, there may be a protective role. In fact, there's some associational data. Interesting, you can't hang your hat on it, but showing that people with high levels of uric acid almost never develop MS, multiple sclerosis. Kind of curious. But back to this sort of situation. So we do know that there are other drivers of gout, high fructose consumption, high alcohol consumption. And so, you know, again, it's probably a metabolic milieu, you know, or environment. And when all the factors are lining up and you throw high uric acid levels in there, then you get this so-called clinical signs of gout. But if all these metabolic factors are good, favorable, low inflammation, low, you know, maybe low insulin resistance, so on and so forth, then you may tolerate higher levels of uric acid and not ever see gout. Now, what happens when someone goes on a carnivore diet? It depends. Some people, because their metabolic health improves so rapidly, the blood glucose normalizes, their inflammation normalizes so quickly, even if uric acid levels rise, they don't precipitate gout. Now, others who maybe are more slow to respond with the metabolic changes, or they're starting from a worse position, maybe or they have everything already in the system for gout, then those people may, when they first go on a carnivore diet, actually precipitate out a gout attack. And what generally happens, and they're no fun. You know, I've never had one personally, but I understand they're very painful, and no one wants to recreate that. So a lot of people are apprehensive. So in that situation, if you're a physician or a provider listening, those people may need support with the traditional medications, whether it be, you know, allopurinol, colchicine, you know, the Indocin, or some of the other anti-inflammatories, or some of the new medications out there. Initially, as they transition, and then as as their metabolic health improves, generally they're able to no longer depend on those drugs. And despite having higher uric acid levels, which may or may not occur, they may never see another gout episode. So that is kind of gout for those people asking that. So short answer is, if I have gout, will the carnivore diet make it better or worse? In the short term, if you've still got all those inflammatory issues going on, you may notice a flare-up. As those improve, generally the trend is the gout goes away. Okay. So post-debate with Joel Kahn. So Joel was kind enough to come on to the podcast. He, it's a tough place to be. Meat are everybody in there is a meat eater. A lot of them are ex-vegans that failed. I try to keep it, not emotional, but a helpful debate. And I think he provided some benefit to our members. Absolutely. How it went. We first agreed that the government response, the medical powers that be, have kind of dropped the ball on the coronavirus with regard to really saying, hey, let's fix metabolic health. This is a critical time, and I've been saying this for a while, many others have. I've been talking about coronavirus less and less lately, is because it tends to get you basically shut down on social media, which is frustrating. But I think the fact that we are not saying, look, don't go cower indoors and gain 15, 20 pounds eating junk food and watching Netflix. Get outside in the sun when you can. If you need to avoid, close contact to other humans, that's fine. But get outside, exercise, eat healthful, nourishing foods, whatever those are. Clearly, they're not the processed refined crap. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You know, if we would have everybody, instead of gaining 10, 15 pounds, losing 10, 15 pounds, getting in shape, you know, improving their glycemic control, improving their inflammation, we would probably see maybe still in the same number of cases, you know, because, you know, that's what happens. You know, a lot of people get it, most people don't get sick, but we might see a much better outcome with regard to morbidity and mortality. And even though those numbers are not huge, they're still enough to be stressful to a lot of people. So no one wants to get sick, no one wants to die. But if you improve the host, you know, make a robust, strong, healthy body, good, competent immune system. And again, we talked about how do you measure immunity, and it's a little bit challenging, quite honestly. But we do know that obesity, inflammation, poor glycemic control, and probably a number of other things definitely lead to worse immunity. So anyway, went through that. You know, we both agreed that lifestyle trumps the pharmaceutical type, you know, system. I asked him about what do you think the function is of LDL, and he kind of dodged that question, which, you know, yeah. And then kind of talk about what the ideal optimal level is based on this or that, and that is what it is. And then, you know, we kind of talked a little bit about, you know, is there a qualitative difference versus a quantitative difference in LDL? I didn't really get to really delve as much as I wanted to on that. And there's a lot of things I would continue. I would like to discuss. We only had an hour, but you know, does LDL quality make a difference? You know, and you know, is it oxidized? Is it glycated? Is it a subfraction, different particles? We did touch a little bit on Lp(a) or Lp(a) lipoprotein A, which is maybe an independent risk factor. Just for an example, mine was as low as it gets. Mine was 2, extremely low. For you guys that know anything about Lp(a), and he acknowledged that that's pretty good. We did talk about the relative value of coronary artery calcium scanning, carotid intermediate thickness testing, and he agrees, like I do, that those are very important. Those are probably much more important tools than measuring, you know, blood lipid numbers and some of these other lab-based risk factors, which obviously can change day to day. So these longer-term things may be better to look at, you know, for people that are potentially concerned or at risk. And I agree that I don't think you can totally ignore LDL cholesterol, but I do think it is a risk factor. And just like with gout, I think it is a dependent variable. That is to say, again, perfect metabolic health in all other things, LDL high, maybe not a big deal, but still, if you wanted to be more cautious, you would measure your carotids, you'd measure your coronary artery calcium scan, like I've done. And what my coronary artery calcium scan was a perfect 0. So we went on to talk a little bit about, you know, the fact that, you know, I think, and I think he's going to upset a lot of vegans because, you know, he basically, well, he put out a little post that says talking to me was much more reasonable and pleasant than talking with a lot of other vegan doctors, which I think is going to upset a lot of vegans. You know, they're gonna kick Joel Kahn out of the vegan church. Perhaps we'll see that. I know a lot of vegans don't feel he's a particularly good representative for veganism because he isn't a diehard, you know, religious zealot type of, you know, it's my way or the highway type of guy, which I appreciate. And I mean, Joel and I have gone back and forth on many occasions on social media, and you know, sometimes in a kind of an FU type of way versus sometimes more jovial. But you know, some of the other things we touched on were you know, regenerative agriculture, and my saying is saying, hey, look, vegans, you're never going to get rid of all animal agriculture. It's just not. That's not going to happen. I mean, some people think it is, but it's really not a realistic goal. The better thing, in my view, and I think for us as meat eaters too, is to work on, let's produce and promote the regenerative agriculture. We can have less reliance on environmentally damaging, potentially, you know, highly industrialized things, particularly with chickens and pigs. We know that any solution, so we have this industrialization. The industrial age kind of wreaked some havoc on the environment, a lot of people would argue. And a lot of people are saying, well, we're just going to fix that by the technologic age. We're going to use it with high-end technology to fix that. I would argue that any solution that doesn't restore the soil, restore the biodiversity, is not a solution. And the way that occurs, the way that has to occur, is by using animals in their natural role. Obviously chickens aren't naturally, their natural role is not to sit in a cage. And so we have to do that to restore the environment. That's clear. Any solution that doesn't do that. And so, why vegans aren't getting behind that and putting just as much energy behind restoring that instead of just standing there, meat is murder, and just looking like idiots, quite honestly, is kind of a little bit interesting to me. I understand the belief that no animal should ever die, and they totally ignore the fact that, all crops produce animal deaths, whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's intentional or not. I would just challenge you to go in the dictionary and read the word pesticide. What does pesticide mean? Pesticide, it literally means to kill pests. That is done with intention. All pesticides are designed to kill sentient, living things, big or small, right? And again, farmers shoot pest animals. Look in Australia, they shoot kangaroos by the gazillions to protect their crops. Birds are shot or killed to harvest olives. And so the belief that there's no death or even minimal death, the way to minimize death, if you really believe the vegan ethos, minimize death, because there still will always be death, is to eat regeneratively raised animals, ones that do not require pesticides, do not require herbicides, generally result in very little other animals dying. These are animals that are eating their natural diet on a grass-based, forage-based system. No grain involved. You could make that decision. Those people that sell that and do that absolutely exist. So again, and guess what? You get the benefits of eating better nutrition. So we had, I think I kind of educated a little on that. We talked about, lab-grown meat, because I honestly think he misses the nutrition from meat. And I think he's all but said this. I think he'll sign up for lab-grown meat as soon as it's available and get some of the perceived nutritional benefit. Do I think lab-grown meat is the solution to save the environment? No, I do not. I strongly disagree with that, but it might, persuade some ethical vegans to maybe get a little bit better nutrition. I'm not convinced that is actually going to be have all the appropriate ingredients. Are they going to how are they going to clone the fat? Do they have fat cells they can get to grow? Are they going to mess with the saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat ratios? Where do they get the building material for those fats? Are they going to be using PUFAs and seed oils to grow those as well? The same thing. Where does the protein come from? When you're making lab-grown meat in a cell culture, you have to provide them protein. You can't just make protein from nothing. So the protein almost invariably is going to come from the same place where the protein comes for the Beyond Meat burgers and the Impossible burgers. GMO crops in China, perhaps soybeans, peas, legumes. Again, this is soil degradating. This is ecosystem destroying technology. And he pointed out the world of the water. And again, I said, Joel, look, those calculations in which they suggest that beef requires, 20,000 gallons to make a kilogram of beef. Listen, 93 to about 99% of that water that they quote is rainwater. It is green water. It is water that would fall from the sky regardless. There's a cloud up there, a rain cloud. It doesn't look down and say, oh, look, there's cows in the field, I'm going to rain. The rain falls regardless if the animal's there or not. And again, with properly raised animals, with regeneratively raised animals, guess what happens? The soil is better. The soil will retain that water better, and you actually improve the water profile. So that was kind of the sort of quote-unquote debate. I think it was fairly collegial. I'm happy to talk to other folks that have a differing opinion and see if we can maybe educate those folks as well as learn something from them. I think the benefit from our audience is Joel talked about how do you assess risk. If you are one of those people who says, hey, I'm going to let it ride, I'm going to go with high cholesterol and be happy with it. All right, guys, you guys have a great day. Again, check us out at meatrx.com. Please support us there. We are growing, and we are going to be a very prolific, dominant, and helpful organization as we seek to change things in the world. Go hit our GoFundMe page. That's linked in the bio in the description below. And have a great day. You guys take care. Bye now.